Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. And this is The Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast.
This podcast is all about taking action and creating that badass business abundance and life that you want.
Where we share stories, laughs, wins, and epic fails to show you the whole picture of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's not just unicorns and rainbows, people.
Jump on and follow us through this raw and witty roller coaster,
where we get down and dirty and go behind the scenes of life and entrepreneurship.
Get on it,
get over it,
and get after it.
Hi, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to The Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. Lynn, it is so good to be with you today. I feel like you're a breath of rationality and just light in my life. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, thanks. You're not so bad yourself. I'm excited to be recording our podcast today. It's definitely a topic we talk a lot about, and I feel like it's a topic that has been just like branded into my soul, that I talk about so much with people and like have conversations around. So we're going to talk about reactive and proactiveness, and probably throw in a little bit of active as well.
Yes, this is I didn't realize this topic was such an important part of my life until I became aware that these things even existed. So I know for a long time, like you just kind of, like when you're in your preteen and teen years, you just kind of live your life like, I don't know what's going on. But then as I became more aware of who I was as a leader, as a person, as a business owner, the idea of proactive and reactive has made such an impact on everything that I do and how I coach my clients. And sadly, even how I think about relationships that I have and the I don't want to call them problems, but the challenges that I have in certain relationships, a lot of it stems from what proactive and reactive is and how I choose to live my life and how my friends and family and just acquaintances choose to live theirs. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about what proactive and reactive are and how that translates to your life, to your business, to your relationships, etc. So, I mean, if anybody's listened to this podcast before or has read our book or knows anything about me, you know that I'm a slight, maybe a lot of a control freak. Acknowledged. Small kind. It's fine. It's fine. I acknowledge that. And I will say that part of the good part of being a control freak is that I feel like it makes me more proactive because I want to control the outcome if I can. So in relationship to business, being proactive is sort of seeing future possibilities of what could go wrong, for in my case, what could go wrong, and then setting up systems and procedures. I know that you're like, Amanda, you can't control, and I know I can't control everything. And sometimes you can, like if you have a system set in place in your life that, or in your business, that will be a reaction to something coming up. Like let's say, like if you have a protocol for, if I get a negative review, I know I'm going to do this on Yelp or whatever. That's a way to proactively handle a negative client review. Like no one wants to get them, and it's setting up a system that will address it when it comes up. So I feel like my control freak really responds well to a proactive lifestyle.
Yeah,
you have things to say because you were just laughing at the storm at me.
I know. And listen, I am a control freak in my own right as well, and especially some of my family members and friends listening, like I definitely have those tendencies. However, what I was chuckling is our outlook on things sometimes so differs. Yours is you want to be proactive to prevent negative things. I want to be proactive to encourage positive things. And
so for everyone who thinks that we're the same person, very different. It's like my superpower is the negative. I see the negative and I prevent it with my superpower. And Lynn lives in the light and she is wonderful and sees the positive, and that's why we work together. And a lot of people think we're the same person. Very different.
I love this. And what I will say about that is, and I do want to back up and actually give a clear definition of the two, but this is ringing in my mind. I had this friend, I was actually just thinking about them this morning. They were like what we call our Hanai family in Hawaii. When we first came, it was a huge Filipino family, and they were characters. And the guy actually worked for us, and that's how we got to know him. And we just became their family. Like every holiday we were at their house, etc. Anyway, he would always say, let's do it for Justin. What do you mean, Justin, Josh? Just in case this happens, just in case that happens. And that always like rings in my mind. I love that. I stole that phrase and use it all the time, because definitely you want to be proactive for Justin, for just in case. Like, how can you save headache, heartache, money ache, financial ache in the future, right? So being as proactive as possible. There are many ways that you can look at proactive, reactive, and even active. So if we break it down before we get into like little stories and stuff, if we break it down, proactive is trying to you're taking actionable steps. You are being smart about things that could happen in the future. You are actually putting in the movement to be to make things happen, right? I would even put in that you're being a bit more strategic and forward thinking, where reactive is passive. You are acting after the fact of something. Just the term in itself is you're being reactive to something. And then I throw in the active, especially when I'm talking about like referral building and relationship building and stuff like that, because there is a third, which is active. And even in business, where you're there, you are doing things, but you kind of like, you could be doing more in the proactive and the foresight, or the foreseeing things, and like the preventative and the planning and the strategic. But there is some activity. It's not completely passive. It's not completely reactive. So just understanding, and like you said earlier, this can apply to everything, anywhere from how you engage in your business, to the relationships that you have in and outside of your business, to the way you think. And we're not one of all. And I know we've had this conversation about other topics in our podcast. We're not in a said box. We float between them, and it can very much be situational. It could be environmental. It could be mindset that's keeping us in more of a proactive state, more in a reactive state, more in an active state. So again, to break it down, reactive is passive, if I would say. Active is engaged, and proactive would be like strategic and forward thinking, is like kind of like the bare, like layman's terms of those.
Yes. And that's why I feel like, and there are certain professions that are more geared towards one another. For example, when I worked in PR for the brief stint that I did, a lot of PR is proactive, because you're just assuming that your client is going to make a horrible mistake. And how are you going to address that when and if they do? So in that profession, there was a lot of setup, assuming like, okay, this person's going to get caught doing this, and this is like, what happens if they get caught doing this? Like, and so I feel like a lot of what I did when I worked PR was creating strategies for the what happens if case scenario. So, and it sadly happened a lot so that was sort of a reason behind that, or an instance behind that particular profession. So that profession, I really benefited from having that proactive look at each client and the world that they were living in, so that I could create a strategy. I know you're like, oh,
well, I'm laughing because your mind naturally goes there to what's going to be the problem, what's going to be the issue.
Yes.
And what I will say, and I love that you use this example, because I am I'm actually getting ready to speak at a international PR conference, and I'm involved like in that world because I have had clients and really dear friends. And it's funny because I feel like it's almost one or the other in its extreme. You definitely want to have a balance, but with PR, I can definitely see PR agencies who solely work in the reactive mode, where they're there to clean up the mess. They're there to pick up the mess. And I think with PR, it definitely benefits to have actually both the pro and the active. And in my opinion, kind of all professions, but since you brought up PR, like you definitely want to create the strategies and have those SOPs and know like, okay, if shit hits the fan, like we're going to do A, B, and C, right? And oh my God, I just thought of a story. And then, but there's some things that you can't plan for. And so they totally have to be crisis management and really, so a lawyer, in my opinion, tends to sit more in the reactive state. The thing has already happened.
Unless they're my lawyer. In which case, like I pulled up every contract available. Like I need a contingency plan for all of these things.
Well, and they can be proactive. However, to me, like most lawyers will sit more in the reactive. I have to share this story. So this is not even business related and probably not so funny, but, but I mean, when we lived in Saudi Arabia, my kids were young. So I was married and my kids were young, 4 and 5 years old. And we decided, my then husband and I decided to go after 7-Eleven, 9/11.
Totally
Thailand and the 7-Elevens. I tell you, they're like everywhere. Anyway, and we decided to go after 9/11. So things were a bit,
turbulent.
Yes, to say the least. And so compounds started getting taken over and hijacked essentially, and there were hostages being taken. And we actually, instead of allowing our kids and us to be reactive in like figure out in that crisis how to do something, we actually had a plan with a 4 and a 5-year-old kid. They knew exactly what to do, how to do it. So did we. If we became under attack, they knew where to go. They spoke Arabic too, so they knew who to ask for in Arabic to be able to go, because our son was perfectly speaking Arabic at that point. And he would have had more control even though Julia was older. So I know that this is maybe not such a funny story just because of the circumstances, but that story, like to me, like you can be proactive in life. It doesn't mean that it always has to be for the bad things that could happen, although that one was a just in case, but you can also be proactive. Well, let me give you another example. We're both coach consultants, and I can remember, over a decade and a half ago, when I like made it my profession. And I was like, okay, so what kind of coach, what kind of consultant do I want to be? And a lot of coaches, and I sat in this, and I float in and out now, but I sat in this more because I was easy. I'm good in a crisis. I'm good at picking shit up. I'm good at like seeing the mess and saying, okay, we start here, and supporting also people through it. Like I have that ability, maybe because of my past, maybe because I was born this way, maybe because a combination of everything. I have lived a very crisis-filled life, trauma-filled life. So I'm sure that has added to it. However, I found myself being a reactive coach, that they would come to me with the issue and we would fix it. We would then put in the process so that way it wouldn't happen again. When I realized that I was being more of a reactive coach, like I realized like the energy that it took to be reactive. I realized that my clients weren't getting ahead the way that they could get ahead. I was realizing that I was actually not doing the best of service, even though they were very happy with me cleaning up the mess. However, am I allowing them to stay in that victim state? And that's something, if you guys have listened to anything that I've written, read anything that I've written, listened to anything that I've said. I do not like pity. I do not like people playing the victim. And so I made a switch. I realized I was being more of a reactive coach, and I wanted to be more of a proactive coach. This is being strategic. This is setting our goals. This is like building for the future constantly. Can we clean up messes when they happen? Absolutely. However, we're going to sit more in the now and the forward versus the mess from before, or, you know, the situation from before, because it's not always a mess. So something to think about, like that, you know, that I went through. And it's interesting when you actually sit and think, are you being more proactive in this relationship? Are you being more reactive in this relationship? And why? Like, what's going on there? Or dynamic. It doesn't need to be a relationship.
Yes. I feel like that's one of the issues that I have with being reactive. It's not that, and again, you mentioned this at the very beginning, you're going to be all three things, proactive, active, and reactive, at different stages in your life, in a situation. That's just the natural way that it is. However, one of the issues I have with being reactive is maybe it's because I'm a control freak, maybe it's because who I am. I don't like the idea that I'm a victim and I'm trying to clean up from the issue that being a victim created. So when I think of reactive in the worst case scenario, not in like the everyday scenario, but what it tends to be in the worst case scenario is this waiting for things to happen to you and then trying to like backpedal from the worst case scenario that you've allowed to happen because you didn't do anything in your life and you didn't look ahead, you didn't think about anything. And I see that a lot in businesses, but also in relationships, where you just let things happen to you and then you try to get out of it. And it's so much harder when you're in a reactive state to get out of that negative situation. If it happens to be a negative thing that you're reacting to, I find that it's harder to get out of that than if you had anticipated that and being proactive, looking ahead and thinking about, okay, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? What's the neutral scenario? And creating a system or a plan that can address it. Now, this obviously you can't plan for everything. I mean, I think 2020 proved that we can't plan for everything, and we can still set up, even if it's a psychological standpoint of being proactive and how we handle things. And I think it's really important that if something comes up that you have to be reactive to, for example, COVID, if we want to throw COVID under the bus, I think what makes the difference is at that point, while you're in it, while you're seeped in the crud, to start making a plan for the future if something else comes up like that. So understanding how you react and how you can get out of it, particularly if it's a negative situation. I mean, there are, reactive positive situations like, oh, I got engaged, like, oh, I am pregnant. Like there are positive things that you can react to, but mostly we're talking about the negative things here. Well, I'm talking about the negative things,
Well,
I love to talk about the negative.
You do. Let's take a different approach. So I definitely hear what you're saying. And let's look at sales.
Yes.
Let's look at sales. So I love sales. And I will fully admit there are a lot of times I'm sitting in the reactive hat, and there are a lot of times I'm sitting in the proactive hat, and then in the active hat. And it's funny because I was just having a conversation with a good friend, but I've had this conversation many times, and they're like, oh, I just get all my business through word of mouth. Okay, well, what are you doing to build those relationship partnerships? Oh, well, they're just happy with my business. Okay, so it's working for you now. So, how are you nurturing that? Like, what's going on? And do you have a proactive sales approach as well? Because you need to have both. Oh, no, my business is all by referrals, all by word of mouth. And coming from a business when I was CEO that we taught referral relationship building or referral marketing, essentially, how to build a referral network. And one of our top producers essentially was saying, nope, I don't have a sales process. I get all my business by referrals. I'm using our system. Well, there were proactive approaches in that because she was building relationships. This past person that I just spoke to this weekend is not. She's just relying on the happiness of her customers, which could work. But here's the thing, guys, is that that will only work so long. And eventually you have to deposit into a said relationship in order to keep that going. Otherwise, it's always feast or famine. Otherwise, you're building on a shaky-ish kind of foundation. So really, are you being proactive in your sales approach? Are you being proactive in your business? Are you being proactive on your business? Are you being proactive and building a foundation? And the crazy thing is, and I know we teach this, Amanda, but I can name off aspects of ourselves where we are very reactive. And some of that is because we have so much more on our plate, but not more than other people, but we have other things that are more priority. We are distracted over here. This has become, it's either priority or distraction essentially, but really it boils down to priority, and focus, right? Because our proactiveness or our energy is going here instead, because we are knowledgeable. We do understand the difference between being proactive and reactive. However, time and time, and this has nothing to do with a problem, right? So this is why I'm giving you guys this example, because even like social media, people are like, oh, I'm like all up in my social media. Really, are you? Just because you're posting 5 times a week and making comments and selfies about your damn self, is that really being proactive, or is that being active? Are you actually being engaged? Are you responding to other people? Are you commenting on other people? Are you building relationships with other people? Also, what's the purpose of your social media? Like, if you do not have a purpose or don't understand your intention behind certain things, then can it really be proactive, or are you being reactive because you're just like throwing darts and seeing where they land, right? So really understanding, again, reactive and proactive don't have to be in a problem situation or preventing a problem. It can actually be in your relationship building. It could be in your sales. It could be in all different aspects of your business. So it's just really being mindful of, okay, are you being proactive? I mean, do you care? First of all, like the person I spoke to this weekend, I don't think she really cares. She's like in it herself, in her own mind, in her own world. And right now she's having a flood of clients come. When the clients stop coming, which they have in the past, because it is the ebbs and the flows, then she might revisit that and say, oh, I need to do something different. I maybe need to go to some networking events or do this or do that. But that's being reactive. You're not building a foundation to be able to continue that relationship. And yeah, so, and it could be as simple as, and we actually had this discussion months ago with that same person, is like, okay, if you're getting referrals, how are you thanking those referral sources? How are you nurturing those referral sources? How are you communicating with them on a consistent basis? Like, that's being proactive. So
yes. No, exactly. There are so many things that fall under that blanket of being proactive versus active versus reactive. And that's why, because there are so many nuances to it, I really feel like it's important in your business to be as proactive as you can for the positives and the negatives. But things like, for example, your referral networks, like seeking out your strategic alliances and actually actively trying to build those, actively trying to build client relations. I mean, yes, like just being a client and, a customer relation, like obviously there's going to be some kind of relationship there, but building it beyond just the initial transactional relationship is what we're talking about in that referral world. And thinking ahead to what's been an issue, what's been working for you. So if you know that this one thing works, then set up a system and repeat it so that it works again and again and again in your favor. So even it's not necessarily just recognizing what's screwing you over, but recognizing what's doing you well, like what's working for you and duplicating that. And a lot of that's just, analytics, like from an analytical standpoint, looking at what's working and what isn't, and actually knowing where you're getting referrals, where you're getting business, what's working for you from a, owner and employee standpoint, like what's working and what's not, and replicating what's good and avoiding what's bad. That's to me what proactive is. It's just taking a deep dive into your business and your life and figuring out those nuances and adjusting your trajectory to hopefully get a better outcome, because it's so easy. Well, for me, it's not easy. Actually, I think it's much harder. I think it's harder to live in the active and reactive because it takes so much immediate energy. Like when I'm living proactively, and I know that people are going to be like, oh, you need to live in the present. And I get that. I hear that all the time. Like, I don't live enough in the present. I get that. But from a business standpoint, being proactive isn't necessarily not living in the present. It's just thinking ahead. It's planning. It's providing for your employees. It's providing for your customers. And it's just being a business owner. It's not necessarily living in the future rather than living in the present, which I know there's that, buzzword these days of like being present. And I get it.
But that drives me crazy, because here's the thing. Yes. One does not negate the other. And I am one who practices presence. I was just away up north, which is a very spiritual kind of area for me. And I practiced presence, like more than what I do here. I really do try to practice presence in my everyday. Practicing presence, being present, does not negate you building a future, does not negate you planning for the future, does not negate you building foundations and fundamentals and to move forward. Like, for the love of God, people, does not negate.
Thank you.
Does not negate it. And so if you were that person that thinks it negates it, then stop listening to our podcast, because you're probably not our people.
No, well, true. And keep listening to our podcast, because you need this information maybe more than you realize.
Anyway, I think we're at time.
Yes, we are at time. Let's give some action steps. So
yes,
moving forward, thinking about your proactive and reactive, for me, and I know, Lynn, you're going to disagree with this, but because I live in the negative, an easy way for me to exercise proactivity, if that's a word, I don't know, it is now, is think about something that either works, that did not work in your favor, or that did work in your favor, and try to replicate that. Create a system, particularly if it's something that comes up all the time. So if you have an issue that comes up, either good or bad, that comes up frequently that you want to replicate, really think about what is it that you can put into place to recreate or to avoid, depending on the situation, that scenario. So it takes a little bit of thinking, and I believe that it's sometimes best done directly after the positive or negative. So you're in that headspace and you're directly involved, rather than thinking about it 6 months later, like, oh, what did I do 6 months ago? Like, to think about it right after the fact. So whether it's positive or negative, sit down in your 1 hour of business work or admin work, whatever it is that day, and really try to plot out a system that you can recreate, positive or negative, that can give you the results you're looking for from a proactive solution for the future.
Yeah, I actually think the best time to do it is during the whatever's going on, even if it's starting small. But I definitely agree. And I would just take the other spin of it, like even looking at it from an aspect of building foundations and fundamentals. So one way to be proactive is, how are you communicating with your people? So setting up a CRM that nurtures your people, that's actually thinking forward. That's being proactive, right? So something as simple as, not necessarily, which I do love creating stuff for Justin, just in case something's going to happen, just in case, like, and also, however, so yeah, you definitely want to do what Amanda said with, like, how can you save headache, heartache, financial ache later? Definitely. And also look at those things that aren't issues, but can maybe save you time, that can amplify the value in which you're adding. That is also a proactive approach. So, and then I would tell you, like, look at your sales process, because we're all in business. We all do sales. I don't care what you say, you're doing some kind of sales. And are you doing a proactive approach or reactive approach? And is that sustainable? Or are you always in feast or famine mode? So look at it and say, okay, where can I be proactive today? And that it's just one step every single day, it's also watching your mindset too, like, because it is a mindset thing too. Are you more in a proactive or a reactive mindset? And deciding, you know, what you would rather be, because some of you may rather sit there in the reactive, and that's your business. But we'll tell you, it's yeah, I'm getting off on a rant, but that's our tasks. Find places where you can recreate that scenario to be able to look at it, to create a proactive approach and system or SOP to be able to prevent it, or to save you more time, more value, or to build better relationships, etc.
All right, my friends, you can do this, even if it's emotional. Try to take the emotion out of it, but you can do this. Just get after it.
Yes, get after it. Until next time, we'll see you. All right, everyone, it's not enough to just listen.
Now you've got to put it into action.
We are so excited to see what you do next.
If you enjoyed our show, please leave us a review on iTunes.
And to find out more about what we're doing, visit us at thepursuitofbadasserie.com.